Hi, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, where today we're going to take a look at one of my favourite Sudoku variants. This is called Renban Sudoku, and it's very similar to normal Sudoku, except that the grey areas, wherever you find them, basically have to contain consecutive digits. So that's the only extra restriction, but it leads to some lovely logic. And we've had a request to look at this puzzle. It comes from 2014's World Sudoku Grand Prix. And I think this particular one was set by Turkey. So yeah, now one thing to mention, if you want to try the puzzle yourself before you watch the video, or even after, you can find a link under the video in the description that'll take you to this software, and so you'll be able to solve it in exactly the same format that you see it on the screen in front of you. Just a plea as well, if you do enjoy the content, please let us know. Comments are really welcome, and subscribing to the channel, obviously, we really appreciate it. So without further ado, how do we do this puzzle? Now, first thing I'm noticing is the 1s and the 8s in the central columns. So let's put in the 1-8 pair into those two squares. And I think this is where I'd look first, because there's a 3 and a 5 in this 3x3 block. So I know these 3 consecutive digits cannot be less than 5. If I try and put 1 and 2 in them, obviously I'll clash with the 3. So this set of digits here must be either 6, 7 and 8 or 7, 8 and 9, both of which contain a 7, and we have a 7 there. So that is a 7, and there must be a 7 up here. Now, one thing I would recommend with Renban Sudoku is that you depart slightly from classic Snyder notation. I tend to highlight in 3x3 blocks if a number can go in 3 cells when I'm doing Renban Sudoku. So that's just something, that's my preference, and something I'd recommend. Now, we know this is 6, 7, 8 or 7, 8 and 9. So again, we know there's an 8 in this grey area here. So put an 8 into one of those two squares. And combining with this 8, and this 8 means that that is an 8. And now we know there's a, with this 8 here, we know there's an 8 in one of these two positions. And that, is that useful? I think it is. There are 7 cells in this grey area. So if we know it contains an 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we know that it does not contain a 1, and therefore one of these two cells must be a 1. And this is the first really important thing with Renban Sudoku we've just discovered here. We have a 1 here and a 1 in one of these two cells, and that means that in this bottom right hand block the 1 is forced into the grey area. Now the moment you see one of the extreme numbers, either the 1 or the 9, locked into the grey area, you know what the grey area is, because it must be the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So, and in fact, look, up here we've got a 2 and a 5 in column 7. So if I know this grey area is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, the 2 and the 5 are here, and the 1 is there, and this must be 3 and 4, and we have a 4 here. So all of a sudden we're off to the races. 4 and 3, there's a 4 down in the bottom left. We've got a lot of pencil marking we can do here. We've got 4s here, so let's put 4s up at the top, 3s here. And here's another little trick. Sometimes with Renban Sudoku, it's just as important not to look at the grey area, but to look at the white area. Now if we look at this block, we can see something important, because we see the 4 here, so I know that this grey area here is a number greater than 4, and that's because of the 2 in the block as well. So this could be 5, 6, 7, I mean it's going to have a 7 in it, but it's definitely not going to have a 1 in it. That's the key thing to note, because this one here, therefore, is forced into those two positions. And that, look, and that means there's a 1 in one of those two positions, and there's a 1 here. So in fact, that square I think has to be a 1. Sorry, that square is 1, that square is a 4. And you can see loads of things, actually. There are loads of things going on here. So this one and this one mean there's a 1 in one of these 3 squares, but we know from the 3 here that this grey area is containing numbers greater than 3. So the 1s must be in those 2 positions. Now that's marrying up with the 1s we've got in this bottom left box. So I know that the 1s in this 3 by 3 must be in column 3. So I've not put 1s in column 3 yet. So they must be down here. Let's come back over here and check this though, because I guess we can go with this 8. We know that these 4 cells here are 6, 7, 8 and 9 in some order, so the 8s must be at the top there, and therefore this must be an 8. Let's remove the 8 from there. 8, 8, 8, 8. 2 must be in one of these positions, because it can't be in the grey cells here, so that resolves the 2 and the 5 at the bottom. Now there's a 5. Oh, that's perfect. Look, now we've managed to lock a 5 into this grey area. Now again, we know that the lowest number that we could have put in this grey area because of this 4 is a 5. So the moment we get the 5, we know the other 2 digits are 6 and 7. And that means these 2 cells must be 8 and 9. And we know the 8 is in one of these 2 cells, so it can no longer be here. This is 8, this is 9. And 9. Oh, that is nice, actually. That 9 is important. Let me just highlight the 6 and the 7, though, just while I'm over here. 6, 7, 6, 7. You can see that 6 is going to be huge up here. But let's look at this 9. This 9 means there's no 9 in the white cells here. So I know now that the 9 is in the grey cells, and therefore, for the reasons, exactly the same reason when we found the 1 in the grey cells over on the right-hand side, once I get the 9 in the grey cells, I now know that the grey cells are obviously 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Therefore, the white cells must be 1 and 2. Now, we could use uniqueness here, but I don't expect we need to, but I'll just mention the point. If we look at this top left box, we know, because of the 3 here, that the 2 must be in one of the white squares. Now, because we've got this 1, 2 locked here, if the 2 is in either of these 2 positions, this puzzle is broken, because there's a uniqueness issue. So if this was the situation and we set this up, there is no way this puzzle can disambiguate between if the 1 was here and the 1 was here, and with the 2's opposite, or if the 1's were here and here and the 2's were in that order. So this setup is bad, i.e. it leads to non-unique Sudoku solutions. If you looked at the solution and you saw the 2 here, for example, then you could stare at that and say, well, hang on, there is nothing about the logic of this puzzle that says that the 1 could not have been here, therefore it would be a bad Sudoku. Now, I'm telling you this, the World Sudoku Grand Prix do not publish bad Sudokus, so actually what we're going to find when we work through it is this cell here will have to be a 2, but I don't want to use uniqueness because I suspect we won't need to, so we'll just bear that in mind. We're looking for a 2 here. Now, but we can use the 6's, because where do we put a 6 in this block? Well, that's going to have to be a 6. That's going to be 8, therefore. This must be 2 and 9 at the top. And this must be 8 and 9, and there's a 9 here, so that's 9, that's 8. That means that's 8, that's 1, that's no longer 1. Now, what next? There's quite a lot going on here. Let's look at this 9. Now, exactly the same logic here, the white squares become interesting because I cannot put a 9 in the grey area here. That would not work because obviously we've got the 8 and the 7 already. So the 9 is in the white cells in this block, and therefore it's in either this position or this position. Now that gives me a 9 at the bottom by simple Sudoku. It locks a 9 into one of these squares, but much more interestingly, look now, I've still got to put a 9 in row 2. Now I know it can't be in row 2 here, obviously, and it can't be in row 2 here, so it's got to be in one of these positions here. Now, can we tell anything else about it? Yes, because of this 9. Yes, this 9 and this 9. We can't put the 9 here in this block, because if we do, the corollary of that is that there would be an 8 and a 7, and that's going to lead to a clash. So this is 9, that means that's 1 actually, which actually gives us more numbers over here. But this 9 now, and these 9s, means there's a 9 in one of these two squares, and that is perfect, because now we know this must be a 2, as we predicted, but we know the 2 can't be in here, because if it is, that would imply a 3 was in here. That resolves the 2 and the 9 on that side, that gives us a 9 here, and you can see how the logic of these puzzles just flows so beautifully. I do think this this variant has a lot of legs. It could become a mainstream puzzle. The problem, frankly, is that you should always seek out Renbans that have been hand created, because I wouldn't trust an algorithm really to produce good puzzles. And the the World Sudoku Grand Prix, for example, is a brilliant source of very good handcrafted Sudoku. So now we know that these squares must be consecutive, and we've got a 6 outside the sum. So this is 3 and 4 into these positions. Now that means 3, 4, that must be 2. Now there's a 2 over here. 2 in one of those two squares. Now we now know the contents of this central chute. Look, we know it must be 2, 6 and 7. So let's put that in actually. So this must be 3 and 4, and we have a 3 here. 3, 4. And that's quite nice, because that means there's a 3 in one of those two squares, because of the 3's and this 3 here. So there is no 3 in this grey area. So we now have some limit on this grey area. 4, 5, 6 and 7 are the only digits that can go in. So we know it must contain a 5 and a 6. Which is a bit annoying, because we don't actually have a great deal of information over here about 5s and 6s. I guess we can use this 5. We know it must contain a 5, so let's put the 5s in there. Therefore, this isn't a 5, therefore this is a 5. I suppose it gives us another number. There's actually a 6-7 pair there in row 4, which would imply that this should be a 4, and that actually is useful, isn't it? Because if this is a 4 and we know there's a 3 outside, this must be 5 and 6 now. Which means this is a 7. This is a 2. This is a 7. And this is a 6. So I think that's all. Looks like it's working. Down here, what do we need? We still need to put a 5 in. Can we resolve that? Probably. Can't see immediately how to. This should be a 3 unless I've made a mistake. And we're looking for a 6 into one of these two squares. So let's pencil mark that in. We know one of these two squares is a 3. 5, 6, 7. Trying to spot an elegant way of doing this. I guess we'll fill in this digit. That would be sensible. So that must be a 5, I think. 5 there. Now where can we put a 5 in this bottom block? It's going to have to be either here or here. And you can see that resolves the right hand side of the grid. So that's going to be 6, 5, that's going to be 6, 7. I need to put a 7 into the grey area back here, so this feeds back on itself and gives me a 7 into that position, which eliminates the 7 at the top. And we need to put a 6 and a 4 in, I think. So let's pencil mark the 4s, pencil mark the 6s. Ah, look, now we've got a 4, 6 pair in column 3. And this 9 as well. So let's remove the 9 from that square. Now this should be a 2 and a 3, I think. They're the only digits left for column 3, and we have a 2 here. So that must be a 2, that must be a 3, this is a 3 therefore, this should be a 7, that means that's a 7, 6, 4, 4, 6, and I'm hoping that we're on the homeward stretch now. This is going to be bad if it's gone wrong. Now what do I need here? Let's get rid of the 3. What am I not seeing? 6. That's 6 is what resolves everything. 6, 5, 5, 9, 9, 1, 1, 2. Check, and it's all good. That is how to do Renban Sudoku. Really beautiful puzzle, as usual from the World Sudoku Grand Prix. Hope you enjoyed that. Do let us know in the comments, and we'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.